A boy with a rare disease was abandoned in the desert. Struggling to survive, he ended up saving a man on the brink of death. What seemed like the end for both of them turned into a miracle neither of them could have ever imagined. Lucas's life had always been marked by pain. At the age of 6, he suffered from a mysterious illness no doctor could diagnose. Symptoms would appear without warning: high fevers, rashes, intense pain that made him cry for hours. His mother, Mariana, had remarried after Lucas's father passed away. Her new husband's name was Carlos. At first, Carlos seemed to be understanding of the boy's condition. But that patience didn't last. Medical consultations, expensive medications, sleepless nights during medical crises. It was all too much for a man who never truly saw Lucas as his son. They whispered in the house, always quiet, so the boy wouldn't hear. But Lucas knew. He knew he was the reason behind the problems. Lucas's only true friend was Thor, a large German shepherd his father had left him before passing away. The dog seemed to understand his pain. Thor would lay beside him during his episodes, gently licking his tears when he cried. There was a bond between them that went far beyond explanation. That morning was especially hard. The previous night had been brutal. Lucas had endured one of his worst episodes. Mariana hadn't slept, doing everything she could to soothe him. Meanwhile, Carlos had stood silently in the doorway, his face grim, his eyes filled with growing irritation. In the morning, Carlos walked into Lucas's room with a strange smile. "Today, we're going for a little trip," he said. "Just you and me." Mariana looked surprised, and oddly relieved. Maybe, finally, Carlos was starting to accept her son. "Where are you going?" she asked, trying to hide a hopeful smile. "I'll show him the big city," Carlos replied, helping Lucas get dressed. "We'll spend some time together." Lucas was weak, but he tried to smile. This was the first time Carlos had ever invited him anywhere. Maybe things were finally going to get better. When they walked outside, Thor tried to follow them. "No, not today." "You stay," Carlos said sharply. "Just the boy and me." Thor let out a soft whimper. His intelligent eyes followed the car as it pulled away, ears perked, body tense. Something in the air had unsettled him. The car drove farther and farther from civilization. Lucas sat quietly, staring out the window. The buildings faded away, giving way to sparse shrubs, then only sand and rocks. He had never been this far from home. "Where are we going?" he asked weakly. Carlos didn't respond. His hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, eyes locked on the road ahead. His face was unreadable, distant. The sun blazed above the endless, arid landscape. "Let's get out for a bit," Carlos said in an oddly calm voice. Lucas stepped into the scorching heat. The sun instantly burned his pale skin. Carlos popped the trunk and pulled out a small backpack, handing it to the boy. "There's some water and a little food in here. It should last." He trailed off, avoiding the boy's nervous gaze. "Why are we here?" Lucas asked, a tremor in his voice. The first wave of fear crept in. Carlos finally looked at him. There was something different in his eyes, not rage, not hatred, but a haunting mix of desperation and resolve. "I can't do this anymore, kid. Your mother spends everything we have on you. We don't sleep. We don't live. This isn't a life." Lucas's heartbeat quickened. He didn't fully understand, but Carlos's tone terrified him. "I want to go home," he whispered. "You're not going back." Those words hit like stones. Lucas staggered backward, tripping over the sand. "I thought about many options," Carlos continued. "None of them worked. You're draining us, our money, our future. I'm sorry." Lucas began to cry, clutching the backpack to his chest like a lifeline. Carlos stepped toward the car, his face pale, as if even he couldn't believe what he was doing. "I'll tell your mom I lost you at the mall. That you vanished while I was buying ice cream." Without another word, the man jumped into the car. The engine roared to life. "No!" Lucas screamed, lunging toward the vehicle. But it was too late. The car sped away, kicking up a thick cloud of dust. Lucas chased after it, shouting and crying, until his legs gave out and he collapsed onto the scorching sand. Silence. The vast desert swallowed the boy's cries. The dust still hung in the air. Lucas remained on his knees, tears streaking down his face, watching until the car disappeared over the horizon. He was completely alone. What Lucas didn't know was that, at that very moment, miles away, another life was about to cross paths with his. The sun was merciless. Lucas sat still for a long time, unable to process what had happened. His young mind couldn't comprehend how someone could leave him here, to die. His tears dried quickly in the brutal heat. Finally, survival instincts kicked in. With trembling hands, he opened the backpack Carlos had left behind. Inside, he found a half-liter bottle of water wrapped in foil and a single granola bar. It wasn't much. "Mom," he whispered, as new tears welled in his eyes. He looked around. There was nothing but sand and rock in every direction. The sun was directly overhead, midday. The heat was suffocating. His delicate skin had already begun to burn. He decided to walk in the same direction the car had gone. Maybe he'd find a road. Maybe someone would spot him. But after only a few minutes, his legs weakened. The illness was draining him. Even in normal conditions, he struggled. Under the scorching sun, every step felt like war. He had to find shade. Staggering forward, he spotted a rock formation in the distance. With the last bit of energy he had, he reached it and collapsed into the small shadow cast by the stones. He opened the water bottle and took the tiniest sip, knowing he had to ration it. Then, he leaned against the cool rock. "Please, someone, help me," he whispered, eyes fluttering closed from exhaustion. When he woke, the sun had shifted. He didn't know how long he'd been asleep, but the heat was worse. Sweat drenched his body. His mouth was dry, despite the small sip of water. The spots on his skin had grown darker, more painful, signs of the disease flaring up. Then he heard it. A distant bark. Lucas's eyes shot open. His heart pounded. No, it couldn't be. The bark came again, closer. And then he saw him. Thor. The German shepherd charged across the dunes, faster than Lucas had ever seen him move. Somehow, he had followed the car. Somehow, he had tracked Lucas across the vast desert. "Thor!" Lucas cried, his voice cracking with emotion. The dog reached him and immediately began licking his face, sniffing him, checking if he was okay. Lucas threw his arms around him, burying his face in Thor's warm fur, sobbing with relief. "You came for me. You came." Thor barked again, as if to say, "Of course I did." His intelligent eyes met Lucas's, radiating the confidence the boy so desperately needed. But the moment of relief didn't last. They were still in the middle of the desert. They had almost no food. Very little water. And Lucas was sick. His symptoms could flare up at any time, and without medicine, things could get much worse. "What do we do now, Thor?" Lucas whispered, stroking the dog's head. "How do we get home?" Night fell, bringing a chilling cold that clashed harshly with the day's scorching heat. Lucas curled up beside Thor, pressing into the dog's warm body for comfort and warmth. He had eaten half of the granola bar and given Thor a few small pieces. They both knew they had to make what little they had last. Under the starlit sky, the desert looked even more vast, more unforgiving. Every sound, the wind whispering between rocks, sand swirling in small gusts, made Lucas shrink closer to his protector. Thor remained alert, ears pricked for danger, body tense. "I'm scared, Thor," Lucas whispered, running his fingers through the shepherd's thick fur. "He's not coming back for us, is he?" Thor growled quietly, as if just the mention of Carlos filled him with distrust. Exhausted in every possible way, Lucas finally drifted off to sleep, shielded by the one soul he knew would never leave him. Dawn brought new trials. Lucas woke aching all over. His throat was dry and burning. Carefully, he took another small sip from the bottle, now only half full. He poured a bit of water into his palm for Thor, who lapped it up gratefully. Thor watched Lucas's every move, as if fully aware of how serious things were. "We have to find help today, Thor," Lucas rasped. "We won't make it much longer out here." The sun was already climbing, promising another brutal day. Lucas took a few more bites of the granola bar and handed the rest to Thor, who accepted it hesitantly, almost as if he understood the child needed it more. With what strength he had left, Lucas pushed forward. Thor walked ahead, sniffing the wind, following some invisible instinct. If anyone could find a way out of this desert, it was Thor. They walked for hours, stopping only for short breaks in whatever shade they could find, under rocks, beside thorny shrubs. The heat intensified. Lucas's skin burned with sun exposure, and the disease flared again. Pain pulsed through his joints. The spots on his skin itched and throbbed. Every step became a test of will. "I don't know, Thor," he murmured as the sun reached its peak. Thor suddenly stopped, ears erect, body still. His head turned sharply to the right, sniffing hard. Lucas tried to follow, legs wobbling, breath shallow. Thor looked back, waiting, urging him with his eyes. Lucas pulled together every bit of strength left in his body and trudged after the dog, climbing a low sandy hill. At the top, his eyes widened. In the distance, partially hidden by rocks, was a vehicle. An expedition-style jeep, parked strangely, like someone had left in a hurry. "A car!" Lucas gasped, for the first time in days feeling hope surge through his chest. Thor barked, clearly excited by the discovery, and trotted ahead toward it. Lucas followed. His young mind imagined rescue. People. Help. Water. Maybe even a radio to call for his mom. The driver's door was cracked open. The windows and paint exposed to the sun were free of dust. Someone had been here recently. "Hello?" Lucas called out, voice unsure. "Is anyone here?" No answer. Thor sniffed aggressively around the jeep, then stopped, fixated on something behind it. He let out a low, warning bark, not aggressive, but tense. Lucas rounded the back of the vehicle, and froze. There was a man lying face down in the sand. At first, fear gripped him. But it quickly gave way to something stronger, concern. The man wore expensive clothes now stained and sun-faded. His skin was red and blistered. His lips were cracked and dry. But what stunned Lucas most were the blotchy marks on the man's skin, the same kind Lucas had during his worst attacks. Thor had already approached the man, sniffing him, then looked to Lucas as if waiting for him to decide what to do. Lucas hesitated. What if he was dangerous? What if it was a trap? Carlos always warned him about strangers. But something about this man felt familiar. Even though Lucas was sure he'd never seen him before. Steeling himself, Lucas stepped closer and gently touched the man's shoulder. "Sir, are you okay?" No response. Lucas moved his hand near the man's nose. He felt a faint breath, He was alive. But just barely. Thor barked again, more insistent this time, then ran to the jeep's open door. The dog stood on his hind legs and placed his front paws on the edge of the seat, looking inside, tail still, ears perked. Lucas followed, uncertain. Inside the glove compartment, which was hanging open, sat a metal thermos. The boy grabbed it. The outside was still warm from the sun, but when he opened the lid, a miracle, there was water inside. Not cold, but clean. He now faced a heartbreaking decision. That water could mean survival for him and Thor over the next few days. But the man lying in the sand clearly needed it more, now. Lucas looked at the unconscious stranger. Then at Thor. Then at the bottle in his hands. What should he do? The weight of the decision pressed down on his small shoulders. The water might keep him alive longer. But something deeper, perhaps something his mother had once taught him, whispered that he couldn't just let this man die. "We have to help him, Thor," he finally said, lowering himself beside the stranger. Carefully, Lucas lifted the man's head and dripped a few drops of water onto his cracked lips. No response. He tried again, giving him a little more. Seconds felt like an eternity, until finally, the man's body twitched in a weak spasm. A faint groan escaped his throat. His eyes fluttered open, clouded, disoriented. "Water," the man whispered, barely audible. Lucas helped him take a few more cautious sips, careful not to spill a drop. The man coughed but slowly began to breathe more steadily. His eyes focused, locking onto the boy's face. Who are you?" he asked, voice hoarse and trembling. "My name's Lucas," the boy answered. "And this is Thor." The man's gaze shifted to the dog, then back to Lucas, as if unsure whether either of them were real or hallucinations. How did you find me?" Lucas felt a knot in his chest. The question pulled all the horror of the last few days back to the surface. "My stepfather left me out here," he said, barely above a whisper. "He didn't want me anymore." The man's eyes widened in disbelief. He tried to sit up, but he was still too weak. "I'm Eduardo," he finally said. "Eduardo Mendez. And I don't think I've got much time left." Lucas noticed the blotchy, burning patches spreading along Eduardo's arms, the same ones he'd seen on his own body during the worst episodes. "You're sick," Lucas said softly. "Like me." Eduardo frowned in confusion. "What do you mean?" "The spots. The fever. The pain. I get them too." A heavy silence fell. Eduardo stared at Lucas like he was seeing a ghost. "That's impossible," he whispered. "In 30 years, I've never met anyone else with this." With great effort, he pushed himself up onto one elbow. "My Jeep," he said weakly. "I need to get back to it." Lucas looked toward the vehicle, about 10 meters away. "Can you walk?" he asked. Eduardo shook his head slowly. "I don't know. But I have to try." Thor watched them closely, stepping closer to Eduardo, almost as if offering support. With Lucas on one side and Thor on the other, Eduardo struggled to his feet. His legs trembled, nearly collapsing beneath him with every step. The pain etched across his face was unbearable. But somehow, they made it to the Jeep. Eduardo collapsed into the front seat, panting hard. Lucas and Thor climbed in behind him, finally out of the sun's brutal glare. "In the glove box," Eduardo muttered. "There's medicine." Lucas opened the compartment and pulled out a small first aid kit. Eduardo guided him to the correct bottle, pills with a label the boy couldn't read. With shaking hands, Eduardo took 2 and swallowed them with what was left of the water. "Now we need to get out of here," he said, eyeing the dashboard. He turned the key in the ignition. Nothing. He tried again. Still nothing. Eduardo slammed a fist against the steering wheel. Battery's dead. Probably overheated in the sun. Lucas felt a wave of dread wash over him. So close to safety, yet still trapped. Eduardo noticed the panic rising in the boy's face. "There's another way," he said, suddenly more focused. The medicine had begun to work. "It's a manual transmission. If we can push it fast enough, we can pop-start it." Lucas stared at him, not understanding. "We need to push it," Eduardo explained, "until it builds up speed. Then I'll shift into second gear and start the engine." "But you can't even stand," Lucas pointed out. Eduardo hesitated, then nodded grimly. "You're right. I can't. And even if we get it running, I'm not sure I'll be able to drive." The situation seemed hopeless again. Lucas looked at Thor, who had followed every word of the conversation with keen, intelligent eyes. And suddenly, a wild idea formed in the boy's mind. "What if I help you drive?" Eduardo blinked. "You're just a child." "I can hold the wheel," Lucas said with surprising determination. "You can do the pedals." In any other moment, the suggestion would have been absurd. But right now, this was survival. And Lucas looked sharp. Brave. Eduardo gave a slow nod. "Let's do it." With immense effort, Eduardo climbed out of the jeep. Every movement sent sharp pain through his joints, but he pushed through it. Lucas shifted to the passenger seat, listening closely as Eduardo gave him instructions. "When I yell, you release the handbrake, put it in second gear, and when I tell you, turn the key." Lucas nodded, his face pale, but focused. This was a lot for any child, let alone one who'd barely survived a night in the desert. Eduardo positioned himself behind the jeep. "Ready?" "Ready," Lucas replied softly. Thor stood beside Eduardo, then surprisingly pressed his body against the rear bumper as if he understood what they were trying to do. Eduardo blinked at the dog. "You're serious?" Thor braced his paws in the sand. "Okay, then let's go." Using more legs than arms, Eduardo began to push. The jeep creaked forward slowly. Thor barked once, digging in, pushing with all his strength. The wheels began to roll. "Now!" Eduardo shouted. Lucas dropped the handbrake and engaged second gear. The jeep began to roll downhill slightly. Eduardo gave it one final push with everything he had, then stumbled forward and leapt into the driver's seat, slamming the door behind him. "Clutch in, turn the key!" he barked. Lucas did exactly as he was told. The engine coughed. Again. A third time, and then roared to life. Thor barked loudly in victory, racing alongside the jeep as Eduardo carefully revved the engine. "Open the back door for Thor!" Eduardo shouted, still keeping his foot on the clutch. Lucas reached back and pulled the handle. Thor leapt in smoothly and landed in the back seat. Eduardo finally eased off the clutch. The jeep started moving forward through the sand. "We did it," Lucas whispered, stunned. Eduardo gave him a quick, tight smile. "We did. But the real test is just beginning." He coughed, wiping sweat from his brow. "I need you to keep that wheel steady, okay? I'll take care of the pedals." Lucas nodded, gripping the steering wheel tightly with both hands. "Just follow the sun. It's heading west. That should lead us to a road. Maybe even a village." Lucas's arms were already tired. But he didn't complain. He kept the wheel straight, staring out at the endless terrain. Thor sat alert in the back, watching everything. They drove for hours over rough, uneven ground. Eduardo called out soft instructions. "A little left, now right, good, good. Avoid that rock." The sun began to sink lower, casting long shadows across the sand. And then, Lucas saw it. Something's there! In the distance, the shape of buildings, blocky silhouettes not made by nature. Eduardo squinted, then smiled. Structures. A village. We're almost there. Just a little more, Lucas. The boy's arms ached, his hands were cramping, but the sight of people, safety, hope, it gave him strength. We can do this, Thor, Lucas said, glancing back. The dog wagged his tail in response. As they rolled closer, details came into view, no more than 20 buildings, a small chapel, and something that resembled a clinic. Eduardo guided Lucas to the center of the village. People were starting to notice them, especially the strange way the jeep moved. The engine sputtered as they came to a stop. A small group of villagers approached, curious and cautious. Help us, Eduardo managed to whisper before his eyes rolled back. His body gave out. The last thing he heard was Thor's anxious bark, and Lucas shouting his name. Distant voices and the scent of herbal medicine were the first things Eduardo became aware of as he drifted back into consciousness. He lay on a simple wooden bed, under a thatched roof. His eyes blinked against the filtered sunlight streaming in through the shutters. He's waking up, a woman's voice said nearby. A middle-aged woman with kind eyes and streaks of gray in her hair approached him. She placed a rough but gentle hand on his forehead. The fever's broken, she said with a relieved smile. I wasn't sure you'd survive. But the medicine finally kicked in. Eduardo tried to speak, but his throat was like sandpaper. She helped him sit up slightly and brought a glass of water to his lips. He drank slowly, every swallow easing the fire in his throat. Lucas, he rasped finally. The boy, where's the boy? He's resting in the next room, the woman replied with a smile. You were both in terrible shape. We weren't sure either of you would pull through. Eduardo tried to sit up farther, but a sharp pain shot through his body, forcing him back down. Easy, she said gently. You were on the edge of complete collapse. Dehydrated. Fevered. And those marks on your skin. She paused, then added softly, I've never seen anything like them. How long? Eduardo asked, struggling to form the words. 3 days, she replied. You've been unconscious for 3 days. The boy woke up yesterday. He's still very weak. Just then, the door creaked, and Thor padded into the room, tail wagging softly. He immediately jumped onto the bed and began licking Eduardo's face. Eduardo couldn't help but laugh, a dry, raspy sound, but filled with emotion. Thor, he murmured. You stayed? That dog hasn't left your side, the woman said warmly. He's been watching both of you like a guardian angel. Moments later, Lucas entered the room. His face lit up when he saw Eduardo awake. Señor Eduardo, he cried. You're okay. Eduardo felt a rush of emotion. This boy, abandoned, sick, barely alive, had saved his life. And now he stood here, smiling with quiet pride. Lucas, Eduardo said hoarsely. Because of you, and Thor. I'm still here. The woman watched them, clearly touched. I'm Dona Rosa, she said. The healer of this village. Welcome to Santa Clara del Desierto. In the following minutes, Eduardo and Lucas slowly began to share their story. How Lucas had been abandoned by his stepfather in the desert. How Thor had found him. How they had discovered Eduardo unconscious near the jeep and made it all the way here. Dona Rosa listened, her expression shifting from shock to anger to deep sympathy. Left a child in the desert? She gasped. What kind of monster would do that? She turned to Eduardo. And you have the same strange illness as this boy? Eduardo looked at Lucas, who now sat cross-legged on the floor beside Thor, petting the dog gently. I don't think it's a coincidence, Dona Rosa, he said slowly. I've spent my entire life searching for someone else with what I have. I've seen the best doctors in the world, but I've never met another soul who shares these symptoms. And now, at the most desperate moment of my life, a child, sick with the same disease, finds me and saves me. He shook his head slowly. This can't be random. You speak like a man of wealth, Dona Rosa said, tilting her head thoughtfully. Who exactly are you, Señor Mendez? Eduardo hesitated. I am Eduardo Mendez, owner of Mendez Pharmaceuticals. Her eyes widened. The Mendez Pharmaceuticals? The ones with ads all over television. Lucas looked up in awe. You own that company? Yes, Eduardo said softly. And for 30 years I've used that company to try and understand this illness. To find a cure. And did you? Lucas asked. Did you find one? Eduardo looked at his hands, still covered with the telltale blotches. No, he admitted. Only treatments that ease the symptoms. Nothing that truly works. Dona Rosa folded her arms. And you came to the desert, why? I read about a rare plant, Eduardo explained. One that only grows in these dry regions. It's said to have medicinal properties that might help. He looked again at Lucas. But now, I'm beginning to think the real cure I've been searching for all these years wasn't a plant. Maybe it's this boy. The next morning, Eduardo felt stronger. The fever was gone, and the pain in his joints had lessened, though he was still weak. Dona Rosa brought him clean clothes and helped him get dressed. Lucas was already up and moving, his childlike resilience helping him recover faster. Thor never left his side. He's like your shadow, Eduardo commented with a smile as Thor trotted beside the boy. He always is, Lucas replied proudly. He saved me more than once. Dona Rosa led them to the village's small medical outpost, a clay brick building with a hand-painted cross above the door. Inside was an elderly man with thick white hair, round glasses, and a calm, intelligent gaze. This is Dr. Oliveira, Dona Rosa said. He's been our doctor for decades. Eduardo shook the man's hand with visible respect. Doctor, thank you for caring for us. Oliveira studied Eduardo and Lucas carefully, especially the matching marks on their skin. It's fascinating, he murmured, motioning for them to sit. I've never seen anything like this in my 50 years of practicing medicine. And you say both of you share identical symptoms? Eduardo nodded. Joint pain, fevers, rashes, sudden flare-ups. No pattern, no cure. Oliveira leaned in thoughtfully. There's one major difference, though. The boy was born with it. You developed it later in life, correct? Yes, Eduardo confirmed. My symptoms began in my teens. The doctor scribbled notes in a worn leather notebook. I'd like to run some basic blood work, he said. We don't have much equipment, but we can do preliminary testing here. Eduardo and Lucas agreed, and soon, Oliveira had drawn samples from both. As they waited for the results, Lucas asked if he could call his mother. Dona Rosa escorted him to the village's only landline. Eduardo sat nearby, heart racing, listening as Lucas picked up the receiver. Mom? Lucas's voice cracked. It's me. I'm okay. No, I'm not hurt. Thor is with me. Tears streamed down the boy's face. Eduardo's chest tightened just hearing the relief and emotion in his voice. Lucas spoke quietly, explaining where he was and what had happened. When the call ended, he turned to Eduardo with wide, shining eyes. She's coming. She told the police everything. They arrested Carlos. Eduardo exhaled. Good. That man should be held accountable for what he did. She cried a lot, Lucas added softly. She thought she'd never see me again. Eduardo placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. Your mother must be incredibly strong. Lucas nodded. She always tried to protect me, even when nobody knew what was wrong. Just then, Dr. Oliveira returned. His expression was unreadable, focused, stunned. Señor Mendez, he said. May I speak with you alone? Eduardo stood slowly, exchanging a glance with Lucas. Wait here with Thor, okay? The boy nodded, and Eduardo followed the doctor into the back room. The doctor adjusted his glasses, holding a sheet of handwritten notes. I've worked in this remote region for over 30 years. I've seen tropical fevers, rare blood disorders, parasites that don't exist anywhere else. But this… He tapped the paper. Your blood shows markers of a rare autoimmune disorder. That part checks out. But the boy's sample… He paused. His blood contains antibodies. Rare ones. Ones that seem to neutralize the autoimmune response. As if his body adapted. As if it learned to defend itself. Eduardo leaned against the wall, his legs suddenly weak. You're saying… I'm saying, Oliveira continued, his blood may hold the key to a treatment. Maybe even a cure. Eduardo stared at the doctor, stunned. 30 years. I've spent millions. Searched the globe. And the answer was in that boy's blood? It's still early, Oliveira cautioned. But I've never seen anything like this. If you had access to proper labs, genetic sequencing, protein isolation… I do, Eduardo interrupted. I have everything. A research team. The best in the country. If he agrees, and if his mother agrees… Oliveira nodded slowly. Then, yes. You may be able to isolate the compound. Create a breakthrough. Eduardo exhaled shakily. This boy, who days ago had been left to die in the desert, could change medical history. Can I tell him? Eduardo asked. Yes, Oliveira replied. But use simple words. He's still a child. Eduardo returned to the front room, where Lucas sat on the bench, petting Thor. The boy looked up immediately. What did he say? Is it something bad? Eduardo knelt beside him, ignoring the ache in his joints. No, Lucas, he said softly. It's something very good. You know how we both have this illness? With the fevers and the pain? Lucas nodded solemnly. Well, it looks like your blood has something special in it. Something that helps you fight it better than I can. And if your mom agrees, I'd like you both to come with me. I have a lab, a safe place where we can study it. And maybe, just maybe, we can make medicine to help people like us. Lucas blinked, taking it all in. His face grew serious, far beyond his years. Will it cure us? He asked. Eduardo gave a slow, honest nod. Maybe. I hope so. I really do. The boy smiled faintly. Can Thor come too? Eduardo chuckled. Of course. Thor's the real hero here. Later that afternoon, the sound of a helicopter echoed across the desert sky. Villagers gathered in the square as the aircraft slowly descended on the outskirts of Santa Clara. The wind whipped through the dry grass, stirring dust into golden spirals. The door swung open, and Mariana stepped out. Disheveled, trembling, and red-eyed from tears, she scanned the crowd. Lucas. The boy ran from the clinic, arms wide. Mom. She dropped to her knees as he crashed into her arms, holding him so tightly as if afraid he might disappear again. My baby, she sobbed, kissing his forehead, cheeks, hair. I thought I'd lost you forever. Thor barked joyfully, wagging his tail and jumping in excited circles around them. Eduardo stood back, watching silently, giving them space. When Mariana finally looked up, her tear-filled eyes met Eduardo's for the first time. She approached him slowly, still holding Lucas's hand. "Your Señor Mendez?" she asked softly. "The man who saved my son?" Eduardo shook his head. "No, Señora. Your son saved me." She blinked, confused. "When they found me, I was unconscious. Dying. He shared the last of his water with me, dragged me into shade, and helped me survive long enough to reach this village." Mariana looked at Lucas in awe, tears returning to her eyes. Then Eduardo continued. "The doctor has told you about the blood tests?" Mariana nodded. "He said Lucas has something special inside him. Something that might help people." "Yes," Eduardo said. "Something that could help thousands, maybe millions." "What are you asking from us?" she asked, voice cautious. Eduardo took a breath, meeting her gaze with gentle seriousness. "That you come with me, to the city. To my lab. All I want is to study his blood further. No pain. No experiments. Only samples. Carefully, ethically. And if it works, we could create real treatment. Maybe even a cure." Mariana hesitated, eyes flicking to her son, then back to Eduardo. "He's been through so much. I won't let him be used." "He won't be," Eduardo said firmly. "I swear to you. I've spent my life building a company to fight this disease. Now your son may hold the answer I've been searching for. But he's not just a patient. He's the reason I'm alive. I owe him everything." He paused. "And I'll pay for everything. His treatment. His education. Your housing. No matter what the tests show. I just want to give him the life he deserves." Mariana's lips trembled. She looked at her son, thin, still healing, but alive. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered. "We're strangers to you." Eduardo glanced at the sky, then back at her. 3 days ago, I thought God had abandoned me. I was angry. Bitter. Dying alone in the sand. And then, a boy with the same rare disease found me, and saved me. I don't believe in coincidences anymore, Señora. I believe your son was sent to me, for a reason we don't yet understand." Mariana held Lucas close, stroking his hair. After a long silence, she finally nodded. "All right," she whispered. "We'll come." 6 months later. A sleek, glass-paneled building stood tall in the heart of the city. The logo, Mendez Pharmaceuticals, now known worldwide. Inside one of its top floors, a press conference was underway. Journalists, scientists, and health officials from all over the world filled the room. At the front of the stage stood Eduardo Mendez. He adjusted the microphone and began, his voice steady but full of emotion. "Good morning. Thank you all for being here today. It's my honor to officially launch the Mendez Foundation for Rare Diseases, and to announce the release of a groundbreaking new medication, Lucin, the first effective treatment for Mendez-Santos syndrome." The room erupted in soft gasps and murmurs. Eduardo continued, eyes shining with quiet pride. "This syndrome, named after myself and the boy who inspired its discovery, has now been officially recognized by the international medical community. The treatment, developed from natural antibodies found in Lucas's blood, has already helped patients on 4 continents, with a 100% improvement rate in early trials." Applause broke out, but Eduardo lifted his hand, asking for quiet. "But this isn't just a scientific breakthrough. It's a story of faith, courage, and unconditional love." He paused, scanning the audience. 6.5 months ago, I was dying. alone in the desert. I had lost my faith in medicine, in purpose, in God. And then, a 6-year-old boy and his extraordinary dog found me. A murmur spread through the crowd. He didn't hesitate. He didn't ask questions. He gave me the last of his water and saved my life. That boy is here with us today. Eduardo gestured to the front row, where Lucas sat beside Mariana, both dressed in their best. Thor sat proudly at Lucas's feet, wearing a small bow tie on his collar. Lucas Santos, Eduardo said, voice warm and firm. Would you join me on stage? The room applauded as Lucas stood. Nervous but smiling, he walked up the steps. Mariana gave his hand a gentle squeeze. Thor barked once, as if to cheer him on. Eduardo knelt beside the boy, placing a hand on his shoulder. This young man, he said into the microphone, has faced more pain in his first 7 years than many do in a lifetime. He was abandoned, sick, and alone, yet when he found a stranger dying, his first instinct was to help. For that reason, it brings me the greatest pride to announce that our Foundation's new Pediatric Research Center will be named in his honor, the Lucas Santos Mendez Children's Institute. Applause thundered across the room. Reporters rose to their feet. Lucas looked stunned. Is Thor's name on anything too? He asked, whispering shyly into Eduardo's ear. Eduardo smiled. Actually. Behind them, a large curtain was pulled back, revealing a bronze sculpture of Lucas and Thor standing side by side. A plaque read, "The Desert Heroes, for their courage and compassion." The audience gasped. Lucas's eyes lit up. Look, Thor! You're there too! The dog wagged his tail, barking happily. The moment was raw, real, unforgettable. In the months following their rescue, everything had changed. Carlos, Lucas's former stepfather, had been sentenced to 15 years in prison for attempted murder and child endangerment. Mariana had been offered a job at Mendez Pharmaceuticals, not as charity, but because Eduardo saw her strength and intelligence. Within months, she became the coordinator of the company's family support program, helping parents of children with rare diseases navigate treatment, insurance, and emotional care. Lucas, once a sick, forgotten child, now attended one of the top schools in the country. His health had fully stabilized. The medication based on his antibodies had eliminated all of his symptoms, as well as Eduardo's. Lucas now dreamed of becoming a doctor, so he could help other sick children just like him. As for Thor, the brave German Shepherd had become the unofficial mascot of the Foundation. With his signature blue bow tie, he visited hospitals, comforted patients, and starred in awareness campaigns under the title, "The Dog Who Walked the Desert." After the ceremony, away from the cameras and microphones, Eduardo, Mariana, Lucas, and Thor strolled quietly through the garden behind the research center. The sun was setting, painting the sky in golden and crimson hues, almost exactly like the one they had seen that day in the desert. Lucas ran ahead, Thor chasing him joyfully between rows of desert plants. Mariana watched them with a soft smile. "You know what I still don't understand," she said gently. Eduardo turned to her. "What?" "Why Carlos did it. How someone could leave a child to die like that." Eduardo was quiet for a long moment. "I don't think we'll ever fully understand," he finally said. "Sometimes, fear and desperation twist people into something unrecognizable. But no, that doesn't excuse it." Mariana nodded, her voice steady. "Nothing can excuse it." They walked in silence, watching Lucas now sit beside Thor, petting him gently. "We need each other," Eduardo said softly. "That's why this foundation exists. So no parent ever feels that alone. So no child is ever treated like a burden just because they're sick. Mariana looked at him, eyes full of deep understanding. The past 6 months had changed her life, not just financially, though the security was a blessing after years of struggle, but spiritually, emotionally. She had found something more than stability. If Lucas had died out there, she began, her voice faltering. Eduardo looked at her, admiration in his eyes. You would have survived, he said gently. Because you always survive. Even when it seems impossible. A quiet calm fell between them. The kind that only exists between two people who had walked through fire and come out the other side together. Lucas called from across the garden. Look what Thor found! He came running, holding something in his open palm, a flower. A tiny, brilliant bloom. Unbelievably bright, delicate. A desert flower. It's a miracle flower, Eduardo said, recognizing it instantly. It only blooms after rain in the desert. But there wasn't any rain, Lucas said, puzzled. Eduardo smiled, exchanging a glance with Mariana. Some miracles don't need rain, Lucas, he said softly. They just need hope. The boy stared at the flower, then nodded and tucked it gently into his pocket. Thor barked once and nudged his side, as if approving the moment. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting the final golden light over the garden. And there they stood. A man who had found his purpose. A woman who had never given up. A child whose innocence saved them all. And a dog whose loyalty was stronger than fear. A family, not bound by blood, but by something deeper. By destiny. By love. By a miracle born in the middle of nowhere. Lucas looked up at the first star in the sky. Do you think I should make a wish? He asked quietly. Eduardo didn't need to answer. He already knew. Some wishes don't need to be asked. They've already come true.
If this story moved you, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories like this one. Thank you for watching.